your E46, that was your starting journey with the BMW brand. And then since I know you've been in love until recently with your F87 M2. So
Mhm.
maybe we start with that question. First of all, why did you buy the F87 M2? And more specifically, why the N55 and not the S55?
Well, it was James would always jump in and joke that it's because the M2 competition was more money, which is definitely partly a little bit, tiny bit true, and that is, yeah, that's definitely a thing because I do love the M2 competition as well. But the original one for me was like, I don't know, it kind of when that car came out, I definitely couldn't afford one. I saw everyone driving them. I got a chance to drive a DCT version of it, and I absolutely fell in love with it because for me it felt like if there was actually a successor, and this is old news, to the E46 M3, which is I think my favorite BMW, then that would be it, right? So the original one was the one that I always looked at and lusted over the most. And to be perfectly honest, I like the stock sound of the N55 more than the S55. And I like the seats, the basic seats better than the competition seats. And I knew that I was going to use it as a daily. And I just, I thought it looked great. And also, another thing, too, that I always forget about is that the kind of, when you think about the original M2, you think about Long Beach blue. You think about that color because
For
that's like
sure.
the launch color, right? But when you think about the competition, you think about what is it, Alpine white? What's it called?
Alpine White, yeah.
Alpine
Actually,
white,
no,
yeah.
Hockenheim. I think it's Hockenheim silver, actually.
Hockenheim, yeah.
Silver.
That's the one you think about, right? So whenever, and I really wanted the blue one. Whenever you see a competition in the blue, it looks a bit funny. Do you know what I mean? Right. But when you
Yeah,
see the OG M2 in the Long Beach blue, you're like, that's the one I want. And
that's the
so
one.
that's just what I went with. Right. I really enjoyed it. There's
Gotcha.
also other little reasons here and there, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
so before we get to you selling the car, because that just happened recently, um,
Yes.
tell me what mods you felt like you had to add to the car to make it even better. Because I drove that car and it was definitely missing something,
Sure.
from the factory. I remember, long time ago driving that car on the track also.
Yeah, the OGM2 was definitely excellent but flawed, right? They did improve it as the years went on for sure with the competition and the CS obviously, but right off the bat the suspension didn't quite work. There wasn't enough rebound damping and
Hmm.
there wasn't enough travel. Those are the two biggest issues, right? So
Yeah,
it kind of like chopped over the bumps in a really not not nice way.
yeah, twitchy
Also,
way.
and no one really talks about this that much, there is a lot of wheel hop. There's a lot of wheel hop on, especially with the stock tire on
Hmm.
launching. Like if you try and do a standing burnout, which of course I never did, it would go whoop, 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 and it would start the rear axle would start to hop, and it wasn't really that nice. And that's partly because, well, I believe it to be partly because the rear differential only has one mount, right?
Gotcha.
Which is kind of a strange choice by them. But I spoke to
For
an
sure.
engineer about it, and he assured me it was fine. I don't, I'm not an engineer. I don't necessarily agree because there was wheel hop, and it was because of the suspension tuning, right? So I put AST dampers on it, right? I originally went
Gotcha.
with and like for those that don't know, AST Moton is like their sister companies, and they make
Hmm.
some of the best racing suspension of all time. Right, they're used in like proper racing cars. I have Motons on my E46, and they absolutely changed the game. But I put the AST, like the three-way adjustable AST Motons on, and it made the road noise because they had solid top mounts really really loud. This is like a thing for anyone who has an M2 and they're interested in modding it. I caution you very much just how much the stock top mounts on the suspension. This goes for a lot of BMWs actually. Just how
Hmm.
much stock top mounts dampen road noise. Like it's incredible how much of a difference it makes. It will double or triple the highway road noise volume if you go to a solid top mount. That's actually for a lot of cars, but BMW specifically, I found that when you do that, it's really noticeable. So I went back to the one-way adjustable ASTs with the that use the stock top mounts, and that was the perfect medium, right? Also, I
Gotcha.
lowered it, and it looked sick, so there was that as
It
well,
does,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
It really does. Honestly, I saw your farewell video, and I think the car looks fantastic. Honestly, the
yeah,
wheel
yeah.
choice was great too. You've done a good job picking those wheels for that car, and just
Well, I
looks
just
so
copied the
good.
CS. I just shamelessly copied the CS wheels because those Apex wheels are designed to look like the ones from the CS, right? Those are I think they're
Good.
called the VS5RS. I think that's the actual wheel. They're
Are they?
they're,
I'm not
they're
sure.
beautiful, absolutely
They're
stunning wheels,
beautiful.
and they weigh nothing. They're crazy. They're forged and
They're
they're lovely.
forged. Would you have picked the M2 CS if you had the choice?
I think so. I think I would.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really really like that car, and it felt extremely special. I think that will be of the that generation of M2, I think that one will always command a significant premium on the used market or at auction, right?
Yeah.
It was genuinely a
Really good.
fantastic car, one of my favorite things I've driven. It felt like it fixed every little problem, right? Um, and obviously it just looked so good. It looked so good. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, that car is fantastic. Honestly, I always lost over it. Every time I see one, I'm like,
yeah.
maybe I should sell my 1M and get this one. But then I go back, I'm like, maybe not.
I don't know, man. The 1M is such a good car. I drove one very very briefly. I've never like flogged one on a track or anything,
Mhm.
but I really wanted to at some point because it's such a great car, and that has the one thing that everything from the F87 forward is missing, and it's steering feedback, right? So
I was saying that the 1M is such an odd car. It's great in many ways, but also flawed in so many other ways. It doesn't make for a great daily driver, especially where I live. I live in Chicago. It's flat and the roads
yeah,
are not great, so it's not ideal. But once you hit some canyons or you go on the track, it really shines. But unfortunately, I don't do that enough. So this is why I'm always debating: should I get a better daily driver or not? But
right.
uh, I look at the car and I'm like, it's like a rare pair of sneakers. You can't just give it up for another shiny new thing. So
Yeah, no, no, exactly. I mean, and that's the one thing that the OG M2 was really good at, was being a daily. And that's what I tried to tell people when I owned it. Everyone's like, "Oh, this is the car you drive every day." I'm like, "Well, yeah, because it just feels like a normal BMW. Like it's got all the tech. It's comfortable. It's not very loud on the highway. It's easy to drive. It's got good, backup cameras, and like it's just BMW has always done such a good job of blending those two things. But I think the blending of those two things, i.e., like sporty driving and everyday driving, I think is what made me decide to sell it in the end, because I'm fortunate enough to not need to have one car that does everything right now, right?
yeah,
I'm
which is
lucky. I
good. You
have
have
a
a truck,
driveway
right?
space. I've got a
Yeah.
truck. I've got another kind of big, comfy family vehicle on the way, and then I've got some classic sports cars, right? So like I have the luxury of being able to do both. But if I literally had only choice of one car, it would be something like the M2 for sure.
Interesting, very interesting. It's also interesting that you love the N55 because when the F87 M2 came out, everybody was like, "Oh, that's not an M engine. Oh my God, that's terrible. It's gonna suck." And then all of a sudden, it just everybody started to love the N55 over the S55. So to me, it's always interesting to hear from people that own the car.
Well, you see, interestingly, I'm not nearly as passionate about those two engines and their pitfalls or benefits, whatever, as
Hmm.
some people are. I think they're both great. And I actually, from the perspective of sitting in the cockpit, I think I like the S55 a little bit better. It just
Okay.
feels like it has, the two turbos trade offs as you go up into the power band, and it feels a little bit more naturally aspirated. Feels like it has, I think it does have a higher red line. Does it? I think
It
it's a little bit
I think it
higher,
does a
right?
little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels a little bit more like you get to run it to the red line. And even though the noise in the cabin was fake, I enjoyed it just as much or more as the N55. But I mean, the thing is that car, the character of that car, I think, just the M2 generation in general, is about low end kind of grunty, snorty torque, right? Like that's what it was about.
Yeah.
So the N55 did that. It had that kind of snarling low end, like it'll break the rear tires loose at 3,000 RPM, right? Like
For sure.
that's kind of, I still like that character of it. I think that's what attracts me the most to the M2 gen, is that kind of, if it had a naturally aspirated engine, I feel like it would just be a different car. It would feel like a totally different thing. What makes it cool is that character of it, that torque.
Yeah.